Introduction. There was a moment you wanted to say no. Your body knew it. Your mind knew it. Even your heart was telling you, don't do this again. But before you had time to think, you smiled. Sure, no problem. I'll take care of it. The other person thanked you. You walked away, and for a brief moment, you felt like a good person. Then something happened. Later that day, the same person came back. This time, they didn't ask. They assumed. Because somewhere along the way, your kindness had stopped looking like generosity. It had started looking like unlimited access. Maybe you've lived that moment. You answer every message. You avoid disappointing people. You apologize even when you've done nothing wrong. You keep giving, believing that one day people will finally appreciate everything you sacrifice. But instead, you feel invisible, exhausted, taken for granted. Here's the truth that almost nobody tells you. People rarely lose respect for you overnight. They lose it one boundary at a time. This audiobook isn't about becoming cold. It isn't about becoming selfish. It's about discovering why kindness without boundaries slowly turns into convenience, and how you can remain a genuinely kind person without becoming someone the world quietly learns to overlook. Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Hidden Cost of Being Too Nice. Before we explore why people lose respect for those who are always kind, imagine this. It's late in the evening. You've finally finished everything you needed to do. You're about to sit down, relax for a few minutes, maybe enjoy a quiet meal, when your phone lights up. A message appears. Can you help me with one more thing? Your first thought is immediate. I'm exhausted. I really don't have the energy. For just a moment, you consider saying no, but then another voice appears. They'll probably be disappointed. It's only a few minutes. I don't want them to think I've changed. So you reply, of course. An hour later, you're still helping. Your own plans disappear. Your own needs wait until tomorrow, just like they did yesterday. And the strange part is, no one forced you. No one demanded it. You volunteered your peace once again. Then, as you lie in bed that night, a quiet question begins to echo inside your mind. Why do I always end up feeling empty after making everyone else happy? If that question feels painfully familiar, you're not alone. Because the greatest cost of being too nice isn't what other people take from you. It's what you quietly give away, piece by piece, until one day you barely recognize yourself. There is a moment that almost nobody talks about. It happens immediately after you agree to something you never truly wanted to do. You smile, you nod, you say, sure, no problem. The conversation ends. The other person walks away feeling relieved, but you don't. You walk away carrying something invisible. Not anger, not frustration, just a quiet heaviness, a feeling that's difficult to explain. It doesn't arrive all at once. It settles inside you slowly, almost silently. Most people dismiss that feeling. They tell themselves, it's not a big deal. I'm just trying to be helpful. That's what good people do. But here's the truth. That small moment is far more important than it seems. Being excessively nice rarely destroys your confidence in one dramatic event. Instead, it erodes your sense of self little by little. Every time you hide what you really want, every time you ignore your own discomfort, every time you convince yourself that someone else's priorities matter more than your own, something inside you changes. Because every ignored boundary sends a message. Not to the people around you first, but to yourself. It quietly says, my time isn't that important. My comfort can wait. My needs come last. At first, your mind resists that message. But after hearing it hundreds of times, it eventually accepts it as the truth. And once your nervous system believes that your needs always come second, you begin behaving as if that's simply who you are. You stop expecting people to ask whether you're available. You assume you'll be interrupted. You expect your plans to change. Sometimes, you adjust yourself before anyone has even asked you to. That is the hidden psychological price of excessive kindness. Not simply that other people ask for more, but that you gradually stop believing you deserve anything different. Let me tell you about Daniel. Daniel was exactly the kind of employee every company claims to value. reliable, capable, responsible. If a coworker forgot an important task, Daniel quietly handled it. If someone couldn't finish a project before the deadline, Daniel stayed late without complaining. Whenever extra work appeared, he volunteered before anyone even asked. During his first few months, people appreciated him. Managers praised his dedication. Coworkers thanked him for always being willing to help. Daniel believed all those extra hours, all those sacrifices, were building a reputation that would eventually be rewarded. But slowly, without anyone noticing, the atmosphere changed. People stopped saying thank you, not because they suddenly became ungrateful, but because Daniel's generosity no longer felt exceptional. It had become expected. Instead of asking politely, coworkers simply placed work on his desk. "You're faster than I am. Can you take care of this? I knew you'd say yes." His manager no longer checked whether Daniel already had too much on his plate. Meetings continued without asking for his opinion because everyone assumed he would adapt to whatever decision had already been made. People described Daniel as flexible, but flexibility wasn't the truth. Fear was. He wasn't afraid of hard work. He was afraid of disappointing people. Afraid that saying no would make him look selfish. Afraid that setting boundaries would make others see him as difficult instead of dependable. So he continued smiling, continued agreeing, continued believing he was simply being a good teammate. Meanwhile, something very different was happening inside him. Every evening he returned home completely drained, not only from work, but from constantly ignoring himself. He felt invisible, taken for granted, sometimes even resentful. Then he immediately felt guilty for feeling resentful. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. No one shouted. No one betrayed him. A promotion became available. Everyone assumed Daniel would receive it. After all, he worked harder than almost anyone. He solved more problems than anyone. He sacrificed more time than anyone. Instead, the promotion went to another employee, someone with less experience, someone who often declined extra work, someone who protected their evenings, someone who wasn't afraid to say, "I can't take that on right now." Daniel couldn't understand it. He kept asking himself, how could someone who contributed less receive more? Only much later did he realize something uncomfortable. People respected his reliability, but they didn't respect his boundaries. And those are two completely different things. Respect doesn't grow from sacrifice alone. It grows from perceived strength. The moment people believe you will always bend, they unconsciously stop seeing you as someone solid. This doesn't mean people are cruel. It means people adapt. Human behavior naturally follows reinforcement. If every request is met with immediate compliance, the requests increase. If every inconvenience disappears because you quietly absorb it, more inconveniences appear. Without realizing it, you're teaching people exactly how to treat you. And unfortunately, the lesson they learn may be very different from the lesson you hope to teach. There is another hidden cost that most people never notice. It happens inside your own mind. When your outward behavior repeatedly conflicts with your inner truth, you become divided. One part of you wants peace. Another part longs for honesty. One part desperately wants to be liked. Another quietly wants to be respected. That tension doesn't disappear. It follows you home. You replay conversations. You imagine all the things you wish you had said. You picture stronger versions of yourself. Yet when the next opportunity comes, you freeze once again behind politeness. Why? Because for many people, being liked has always felt safer than being firm. Since childhood, many of us were rewarded for being agreeable. The quiet child was called well-behaved. The obedient child was praised. Disagreement was often labeled disrespect. Expressing anger was considered rude. So we learned to avoid friction at all costs. But friction is not violence. Friction creates clarity. A boundary is not aggression. A boundary simply defines where you end and someone else begins. Remove that definition, and people stop seeing your edges. When they can no longer see your edges, they begin walking straight through them. Being too nice also changes the value people place on what you offer. Not because your kindness becomes less meaningful, but because the human mind quickly adapts to whatever is constantly available. Scarcity creates value. Unlimited availability slowly removes it. If you're always available, your availability becomes invisible. If you always help, your help becomes the standard. If you never push back, your silence becomes background noise. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about changing how your presence is experienced. Strong people aren't respected because they're louder. They're respected because their kindness is intentional, not automatic. Intentional kindness carries weight. Automatic kindness becomes predictable. Predictable behavior invites testing. Testing slowly becomes expectation. Expectation slowly becomes entitlement. And eventually, you begin losing trust in yourself. Every time you ignore your instincts, that trust weakens. Every time your body tells you something feels unfair and you silence it, that trust weakens again. Over time, you become disconnected from your own signals. Real self-respect always begins there. Long before anyone else respects your boundaries, you must first stop ignoring them yourself. Pay attention to the next moment you feel hesitation before saying yes. The tightness in your chest, the brief pause before volunteering. That pause isn't weakness. It's wisdom trying to protect you. The greatest cost of being too nice isn't that other people sometimes take advantage of you. The greatest cost is that you slowly abandon yourself. And once self-abandonment becomes a habit, confidence begins to disappear. Because confidence is built through alignment. When what you think, what you feel, and what you say all move together, your presence becomes steady. Your voice becomes calmer. Your posture changes. People feel that certainty without you saying a word. Kindness has never been the problem. Kindness is strength. But strength without structure eventually collapses. You can be generous and still protect your time. You can be warm and still have firm boundaries. You can care deeply without sacrificing yourself every single day. So before moving forward, ask yourself one simple question. Where have you been saying yes? Not because you wanted to, but because you were afraid of what might happen if you said no. That single question may become the first boundary you've truly allowed yourself to see. Chapter 2. Why People Don't Respect Overgivers. Imagine a family gathering. One person is carrying dishes into the kitchen, refilling everyone's drinks, cleaning the table before anyone asks, checking whether every guest is comfortable. While everyone else laughs, that person keeps moving, hour after hour. By the end of the evening, everyone thanks the host. Almost no one notices the person who quietly made the entire night possible. Not because they weren't appreciated, because they had become expected. That's how overgiving works. It doesn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It happens so gradually that neither you nor the people around you realize the pattern has changed. One day, you wake up wondering why the more you give, the less valued you seem to feel. There is a pattern that repeats itself in workplaces, in friendships, in families, and in romantic relationships. The person who gives the most is rarely the person who receives the greatest respect. At first, that sounds unfair. Shouldn't generosity earn admiration? Shouldn't being dependable make people value you more? In an ideal world? Perhaps. But human psychology rarely works that way. Respect is not measured by how much you give. It is shaped by how clearly you define your limits. The moment giving becomes unlimited, its value quietly begins to disappear. When you constantly overgive, something subtle happens. Your effort becomes normal. Your availability becomes the standard. Your sacrifices stop feeling like gifts and start feeling like obligations. People adapt faster than we imagine. If you answer every phone call immediately, eventually no one notices how quickly you responded. If you always change your schedule to accommodate someone else, people stop asking whether the new time works for you. If you never object, others gradually stop checking whether you're comfortable. This isn't cruelty, it's conditioning. Human beings naturally respond to repeated patterns, and overgiving creates one dangerous pattern above all others. Unlimited access. Think about the things you value most in life. They usually have one thing in common. They aren't endlessly available. Time, trust, attention, opportunity. Because they're limited, they carry weight. Now imagine something that's available every hour of every day. No effort required, no waiting, no limits. Before long, you stop noticing its value. The same principle quietly shapes the way people experience your time, your energy, and your emotional support. When your kindness feels automatic, its impact slowly fades into the background. There is another layer that most people never notice. Overgiving often comes with invisible emotional tension. On the surface, you smile, you agree, you say, I'd be happy to help. But beneath those words, your body tells a different story. Your shoulders tighten, your breathing changes, your mind begins calculating everything you'll have to sacrifice. Even if no one consciously recognizes those signals, they feel them. And generosity offered from pressure feels completely different from generosity offered by choice. Strong people give because they decide to, not because they feel trapped. There is an enormous difference between those two experiences. Choice feels calm. Obligation feels anxious. When you're afraid of disappointing someone, your nervous system changes before your words do. Your voice becomes slightly less certain. Your posture softens. Your confidence hesitates. People rarely analyze those signals consciously, but they respond to them instinctively. Respect has always been connected to perceived self-control. When someone appears unable to comfortably say no, others unconsciously begin placing them lower in the social hierarchy. Not because they dislike them, because firmness communicates stability, and stability naturally attracts respect. Let me tell you about Maya. Among her friends, Maya was the person everyone depended on. Whenever someone had relationship problems, Maya. Whenever someone needed advice, they called Maya. Birthdays, last-minute emergencies, unexpected favors. If someone needed help, Maya somehow found the time. She believed loyalty meant always being available. For a while, that belief made her feel important. Then, little by little, everything changed. Her phone continued ringing, but something felt different. People no longer asked whether she had time. They assumed she did. If she hesitated, they sounded surprised. If she mentioned being tired, someone would laugh and say, "You're always so strong." Strong, but completely exhausted. One weekend, for the first time in years, Maya declined an invitation. She simply wanted one quiet evening to herself. The reaction shocked her. No one became angry. They became confused. Really? You never say no. What's gotten into you? That moment revealed something she had never realized. Without meaning to, she had created an identity she could no longer escape. She wasn't being seen as Maya anymore. She was being seen as the person who was always available. And once people begin seeing you as a role instead of an individual, respect slowly gives way to expectation. Roles are useful. People respect individuals. They rely on roles. If you want to be respected, you have to step beyond the role you've unconsciously created. There is another truth that's difficult to accept. Overgiving removes tension, and without a small amount of tension, healthy boundaries cannot exist. Think about a leader who agrees with everyone, never disagrees, never challenges an idea, never refuses a request. People may describe that person as pleasant. They rarely describe them as influential. Authority doesn't require intimidation, but it does require the ability to tolerate temporary discomfort. Discomfort is often the doorway to respect. The next time someone asks you for something, try resisting the urge to answer immediately. Instead of saying yes out of habit, pause. Take a breath. Say, let me think about that. That brief pause changes everything. Space communicates deliberation. Deliberation communicates confidence. People who constantly overgive rarely create space. They respond instantly, agree immediately, fill every silence, and without realizing it, they communicate urgency instead of stability. High-value individuals aren't rushed by every external request. They remain anchored in their own priorities. Their time has limits, their energy has limits, their availability has limits. Because of that, When they choose to help, their generosity carries far greater weight. Intentional generosity feels powerful. Automatic generosity feels ordinary. Another reason overgivers gradually lose respect is predictability. If everyone already knows your answer will always be yes, there is nothing left to negotiate. No one considers your schedule. No one wonders how you feel, not because they're malicious, but because your behavior has already answered the question for them. Passive exploitation rarely begins with bad intentions. It grows quietly. A small favor becomes a larger favor. A larger favor becomes an expectation. Expectation becomes entitlement. One day, people stop asking. They simply inform you. That is usually the moment when respect has already begun to fade. The solution isn't to suddenly become distant or selfish. It's to restore balance. Slow your responses. Allow yourself to think. Instead of saying, sure, try saying, I'll check my schedule and let you know. Instead of volunteering immediately, wait. Give someone else the opportunity to step forward. Instead of giving more than anyone asked for, deliver exactly what you agreed to. Nothing less, nothing more. You're not becoming uncaring. You're becoming intentional. And intentional people teach others that their time has value. Something interesting often happens when you stop overgiving. Some people become more respectful. Others quietly panic when that happens. Their reaction tells you something important. Some people valued you. Others valued your usefulness. Those are not the same thing. Your goal isn't to help less. Your goal is to give from choice instead of reflex. Because respect has never followed generosity alone. It follows generosity that is protected by quiet strength. The moment your kindness becomes a decision, instead of an automatic habit, people begin experiencing it differently. And before long, you begin experiencing yourself differently as well. Chapter 3. Stop apologizing for existing. Imagine walking into a meeting just a few minutes late. You open the door and immediately say, "I'm so sorry." Then before anyone has a chance to respond, you continue apologizing. "Traffic was terrible. I know I should have left earlier. I hope I didn't interrupt anything." The meeting moves on. But something else has already happened. Before sharing a single idea, before contributing a single sentence, you've quietly told the room that your presence is an inconvenience. Most people never notice they're doing this. It feels polite. It feels respectful. But repeated every day, it slowly teaches both you and everyone around you that taking up space requires permission. There are certain words that quietly reduce your presence. They sound harmless. They're spoken with good intentions. Yet over time, they slowly train people to see you as smaller than you really are. The most common word is one you've probably said several times today. Sorry. Not because you hurt someone, not because you made a serious mistake, but simply because you exist. Sorry to bother you. Sorry, can I ask something? Sorry if this is a stupid question. Sorry for taking your time. Listen carefully to what those phrases actually communicate. They suggest that your voice is an interruption, that your questions are inconvenient, that your presence requires forgiveness before it deserves attention. Most people believe they're simply being courteous. In reality, they're unconsciously lowering their own status before the conversation has even begun. Over-apologizing is often self-doubt made audible. It comes from an invisible fear. The fear of taking up too much space. Space in conversations. Space in relationships. Space in decisions. Somewhere along the way, many people learned that becoming smaller kept them safe. If they didn't interrupt, people liked them. If they stayed quiet, conflict disappeared. If they softened everything they said, no one became uncomfortable. But safety has a hidden cost. The more you minimize yourself, the less influence you have. There is an enormous difference between humility and self-erasure. Humility is quiet confidence. It doesn't need to prove itself. Self-erasure is something entirely different. It is the habit of disappearing, so everyone else can remain comfortable. One creates respect, the other slowly dissolves it. Imagine two people arriving late to the same meeting. The first walks in and says, "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible." The second simply says, "Thank you for waiting." Both acknowledge exactly the same situation, yet they create two completely different impressions. The first begins with apology, the second begins with gratitude. One focuses on personal fault, the other focuses on appreciation. Neither person denies reality, but only one protects their authority while acknowledging it. Language shapes perception. Every unnecessary apology quietly tells people, "I hope I'm not causing trouble." Repeat that message often enough, and eventually people begin responding to you through that lens. A manager who constantly says, "Sorry, but could we?" sounds uncertain. A leader who calmly says, "Let's move forward with this," feels grounded. The words aren't dramatically different. The confidence behind them is. This doesn't mean you should never apologize. Real accountability earns respect. If you've hurt someone, own it. If you've made a mistake, take responsibility. A sincere apology is powerful, but apologizing simply because you're asking a question, expressing an opinion, requesting clarification, or protecting your own needs, that's something very different. That isn't accountability. It's self-minimization. The deeper issue isn't the word sorry. It's the belief hiding behind it. The belief that your needs matter less, that your voice is optional, that everyone else's comfort deserves priority over your own. Once you carry that belief, your body begins communicating it too. Your shoulders subtly curve inward. Your voice becomes softer. Your sentences end as though they're asking permission instead of making statements. Your eye contact breaks just a little too soon. These are tiny signals. Most people never consciously notice them. But human beings are incredibly sensitive to subtle emotional cues. They don't think, "This person lacks confidence." They simply feel uncertainty. And feelings influence behavior long before logic does. If you want people to respect your presence, you first have to become comfortable occupying space without apologizing for it. Start with your language. Instead of saying, "Sorry to bother you," try, "When you have a moment," instead of, "Sorry, just checking in." Say, "I'm following up on this," instead of, "Sorry if this sounds stupid." Try, "Here's an idea I'd like to share." Notice the difference. The new sentences aren't rude, they're simply neutral. And neutral language often feels stronger than overly emotional language. Strong communicators don't ask permission before speaking. They speak. Then they allow silence to exist. There is another trap connected to constant apologizing. Over time, you begin feeling guilty even when you've done nothing wrong. Someone seems upset. You assume it's your fault. Someone disagrees with you. You immediately soften your position. Someone appears stressed. You begin wondering what you did. Little by little, you start carrying responsibility for emotions that don't belong to you. That creates confusion, and confusion weakens confidence. Respect requires clarity. You need to know what belongs to you and what belongs to someone else. You need to know when you've genuinely made a mistake and when you're simply uncomfortable because another person doesn't agree with you. Those are two very different experiences. Here's a simple exercise. For the next 24 hours, pay attention every time you say the word sorry. Write it down. At the end of the day, read every example. Ask yourself, which apologies were necessary? Which came from habit? Which came from fear? Most people are surprised by what they discover. Awareness alone begins changing the pattern. The second step is learning to tolerate the discomfort that follows. At first, when you stop apologizing automatically, you'll probably feel awkward. Silence will feel longer. Simple requests will feel strangely uncomfortable. You may even worry that people think you've become cold. Don't run from that feeling. Stay with it. That discomfort isn't evidence you're becoming rude. It's evidence you're expanding your ability to exist without shrinking yourself. Real presence is built by tolerating small moments of social discomfort without immediately trying to erase them. You don't need to become aggressive. You don't need to speak louder. You don't need to dominate conversations. You simply need to become steady. A steady voice, steady breathing, steady eye contact, steady language. If someone reacts negatively because you didn't cushion every sentence with an apology, observe the reaction. Don't absorb it. Someone else's discomfort doesn't automatically mean you've done something wrong. It often means the dynamic has changed. And every meaningful change creates a little friction before it creates stability. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. Your communication becomes cleaner, more deliberate, more confident. You stop filling every silence. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You begin speaking in clear statements instead of cautious permissions. That doesn't work for me. I disagree. I'd prefer another option. Simple, direct, calm, no apology attached. Because beneath every sentence lives a belief, and beneath every belief lives your identity. When you truly believe your presence deserves space, your communication changes naturally. You stop asking people to let you exist. You simply show up as yourself. This chapter has never been about removing kindness from your personality. It's about removing the habit of making yourself smaller than you really are. Every unnecessary apology is a tiny withdrawal from your own authority. Stop making those withdrawals. Your voice doesn't need permission. It only needs the quiet confidence to remain where it belongs. Chapter 4. Learn to say no without explaining. Imagine receiving a phone call just as you're about to leave work. You've already worked longer than expected. You're mentally exhausted. All you want is to go home. The person on the other end says, "Could you stay a little longer and help with one last thing?" Immediately, your heart beats a little faster. You already know the answer. You don't want to stay. You can't stay. But somehow, the word no doesn't feel like enough. So instead, you begin explaining. "I've had a really long day. I promised someone I'd be home. I've barely had time to eat. Maybe tomorrow. I'm really sorry." By the time you finish talking, you've almost convinced yourself that protecting your own time requires a courtroom defense. Most people don't struggle to say no. They struggle with everything they say after it. There is a very specific moment that quietly reveals how much respect you command. It comes immediately after the word no. For many people, the word barely leaves their mouth before panic arrives. Silence suddenly feels unbearable, so they rush to fill it. "I can't because I'm really busy." "I'd love to, but I have so much going on." "Maybe another time." "I'm sorry." Listen carefully. The boundary was already clear, but every extra sentence slowly weakens it. Why do we do this? Because explanation often grows from fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear of sounding selfish. Fear of losing approval. But here's an uncomfortable truth. The more you explain your decision, the less confident it appears. Explanation invites negotiation. The moment you give someone your reasons, you also give them something to argue against. "I'm busy. It'll only take 5 minutes. I'm tired. You'll feel better once you get started. I already have plans. Can't you change them just this once?" Without realizing it, you've stopped protecting a boundary and started defending it. Strong boundaries are not debates. They are decisions. Think about the difference between these two responses. "I can't help this weekend because I've had an exhausting week. I have personal responsibilities. I really need time to recover, and maybe next week would be better." Now compare it with this. "I'm not available this weekend." Both communicate exactly the same outcome. Only one sounds final. The other sounds negotiable. Speaking briefly doesn't make you cold. It shows that you trust your own decision. Imagine your manager asks you to stay late again. Instead of rushing into an explanation, you simply say, "That won't work for me today." Then you stop talking. For many people, that silence feels almost painful. The instinct is to rescue the conversation, to soften the refusal, to reassure everyone that you're still a good person. But silence after a boundary has extraordinary power. It communicates certainty. Most people don't fear saying no. They fear the discomfort that follows it. Yet discomfort is not danger. It's simply adjustment. The people around you are adjusting to a version of you they haven't met before. A version that doesn't automatically surrender every time someone asks. Let me tell you about Aaron. Aaron was known throughout his department as the dependable employee. Whenever deadlines became impossible, Aaron stepped in. Whenever another teammate fell behind, Aaron carried the extra workload. Everyone trusted him. But quietly, everyone also depended on his inability to refuse. One afternoon, his manager walked over and asked him to take responsibility for another urgent project. Normally, Aaron would have smiled and agreed immediately. This time, something different happened. He paused. He noticed the familiar pressure building inside his chest. The old voice returned. Don't disappoint them. Say yes. Prove you're reliable. For the first time, he didn't obey that voice. Instead, he calmly replied, I can't take that on right now. Nothing else. No apology. No long explanation. No excuses. His manager looked at him for a few seconds. Aaron prepared himself for disappointment, for criticism, for conflict. Instead, his manager simply nodded. Okay, I'll find someone else. That was it. The conversation ended. Walking back to his desk, Aaron realized something surprising. The catastrophe he'd imagined had existed only inside his own mind. The fear had always been larger than reality. Most people expect rejection because they've spent years training themselves to expect it. When you finally begin protecting your boundaries, you often discover that the resistance you feared never actually appears. And even when someone does react negatively, that reaction tells you something valuable. Healthy relationships respect boundaries. Entitled relationships resist them. There is another habit many people develop after saying no. They immediately offer compensation. I can't tonight, but maybe tomorrow. I can't help with everything, but I could help a little. I can't commit, but maybe. Again, the motivation isn't generosity. It's anxiety. Anxiety wants to erase discomfort as quickly as possible. Choice behaves differently. If you genuinely want to offer another solution, do it because you want to, not because you feel guilty. There is a tremendous difference between those two motivations. Your tone matters just as much as your words. A strong boundary doesn't sound angry. It doesn't sound defensive. It doesn't sound impatient. It sounds calm, neutral, steady. Lower your pace. Finish the sentence. Allow it to exist without immediately rescuing it. That doesn't work for me. Then stop. Completion creates confidence. There is another important principle. Stop apologizing after setting a boundary. I'm sorry, but I can't. That single apology quietly reframes your boundary as though you've done something wrong. You haven't. Protecting your time isn't selfish. Protecting your energy isn't disrespectful. Protecting your peace isn't something that requires forgiveness. Boundaries are not acts of rejection. They are acts of alignment. Here's a challenge for the next week. Practice the one-sentence rule. Whenever you decline a request, use one complete sentence, nothing more, unless someone genuinely asks for clarification. And even then, keep your explanation brief. I have other priorities. Then allow silence to do its work. At first, you'll probably feel exposed. You may even feel guilty. That feeling is normal. You're experiencing withdrawal from something many people never realize they're addicted to. The constant need for approval. Every time you survive the discomfort of saying no, your nervous system learns something new. It learns that disagreement isn't danger. It learns that disappointing someone occasionally doesn't make you a bad person. It learns that your worth isn't measured by endless accommodation. Gradually, your relationship with the word no begins to change. You stop seeing it as rejection. You begin seeing it as selection. You're choosing where your time belongs. You're choosing where your energy goes. You're choosing which commitments deserve your attention. Selection communicates authority. Authority quietly earns respect. Remember this. People don't deeply respect those who never refuse. They simply learn to rely on them. Reliance and respect are not the same thing. Respect requires visible edges. Edges become visible the moment you're able to say no. Without explaining, without apologizing, and without abandoning yourself the moment someone becomes uncomfortable. Chapter 5. Set boundaries. Early. Imagine you've just started a new job. It's your first week. You're eager to make a good impression. So when a coworker sends you a message at 9:30 at night, you answer immediately. The next evening, another message arrives. You answer again. A few days later, weekend messages begin. Soon, your evenings no longer feel like your own. Months pass before you finally think, this has gone too far. So one night, you decide not to reply. The next morning, someone asks, is everything okay? You usually answer right away. In that moment, you realize something painful. The expectation wasn't created overnight. It was created one small yes at a time. That is why boundaries become so difficult to enforce. Not because people refuse to respect them, but because we often teach people a different standard long before we ever speak. Most people don't struggle with boundaries because they don't believe in them. They struggle because they introduce them far too late. Austed. They wait until frustration has been building for weeks or months, sometimes even years. By then, the boundary doesn't come out as calm guidance. It comes out as emotion. It sounds sharper than intended. It feels heavier than necessary. And the other person is left wondering, why are they reacting so strongly now? The truth is, they're not reacting to today's situation. They're reacting to months of accumulated silence. This is one of the biggest mistakes naturally kind people make. At the beginning of a friendship, a relationship, a new job, or a collaboration, they agree to almost everything. They answer every message immediately. They rearrange their schedule without hesitation. They overlook small inconveniences because they want to appear cooperative, flexible, easy to work with, helpful. At first, it seems harmless. After all, what's one extra favor? What's one late night phone call? What's one weekend commitment? But patterns don't remain small, they grow. Every repeated behavior becomes part of an unspoken agreement. And before long, people stop asking what works for you. They assume they already know. Then one day, you finally reach your limit. You decide to protect your time. You respond more slowly. You decline an invitation. You stop saying yes automatically. Suddenly, people seem surprised. You've changed. You never used to have a problem. Why are you being so distant? Nothing actually changed. You simply stopped ignoring yourself. The only reason it feels dramatic is because the boundary arrived long after the expectation had already been established. Boundaries introduced early create clarity. Boundaries introduced late often create confusion. Think about the strongest leaders you've ever worked with. They don't wait until they're overwhelmed before defining expectations. They establish them from the beginning. Here's how we'll communicate. Here's the deadline. Here's what I'm available for. Notice something important. None of those statements are emotional. None of them are aggressive. They're simply clear. Clarity prevents resentment before resentment has the chance to grow. Human beings naturally explore whatever space appears available. If no limit is visible, most people won't intentionally violate it. They'll simply continue moving until they finally encounter one. That's why invisible boundaries don't protect anyone. If people can't see your limits, they can't respect them. Let's look at relationships. Imagine you have a friend who regularly cancels plans at the last minute. The first time, you say nothing. The second time, you convince yourself they're just busy. The third time, you feel disappointed. The fourth time, you're already resentful. Only then do you finally bring it up. From your perspective, you're addressing a long-standing issue. From theirs, the behavior has become completely normal. Why? Because every previous silence communicated acceptance. Now you're not introducing a new expectation. You're disrupting an old routine. And routines are always harder to change than they are to create. The same pattern appears everywhere. A partner interrupts you repeatedly. A coworker expects immediate responses outside working hours. A family member repeatedly asks for favors without considering your schedule. If those behaviors are never addressed, they slowly become the standard. Not because people are necessarily inconsiderate, but because consistency teaches expectations. Early boundaries are light. Late boundaries feel heavy. Imagine beginning a new position by calmly saying, I don't usually check work messages after 7 in the evening, but I'll respond first thing tomorrow morning. Clear, simple, respectful. Now imagine responding to midnight emails for 6 straight months, then suddenly refusing. The boundary itself hasn't changed, only the timing has, because you've already trained everyone to expect unlimited access. The adjustment now feels much larger. Your early behavior writes the script people follow. If you want others to respect your time, write that script intentionally. There is another benefit to setting boundaries early that many people overlook. They reveal character. Emotionally healthy people don't become offended by reasonable limits. In fact, they usually appreciate them. Clear expectations make relationships easier. But people who react with anger, guilt, or manipulation, the moment you establish a healthy boundary, reveal something important about themselves. That information is valuable. It saves you years of confusion. It allows you to recognize who respects you and who only enjoyed unrestricted access to your time and energy. Early boundaries don't push the right people away. They attract them because emotionally mature people prefer clarity over guessing. They don't want to wonder where they stand. They appreciate honesty. Another quiet advantage is internal peace. When expectations are clearly defined, your mind becomes quieter. You stop rehearsing difficult conversations before going to sleep. You stop worrying about disappointing everyone. You stop constantly wondering whether you've done enough. Structure reduces emotional noise, and emotional stability creates confidence. Confidence isn't built by pleasing everyone. It's built by knowing where your responsibilities begin and where they end. So, how do you begin? Start with the smallest moments. If someone interrupts you repeatedly, calmly say, let me finish my thought. If someone consistently arrives late, say, I'd like us to start on time. If someone repeatedly asks for favors you can't continue providing, simply respond, I won't be able to do that regularly. Notice what these responses have in common. They're short, calm, specific. They don't accuse. They don't attack. They simply define reality. One of the most effective habits you can develop is expectation framing. Before agreeing to help someone, state your limits first. I can help this time, but I won't be able to make this a weekly commitment. Before beginning a project, clarify, I'll need advance notice if plans change. Before entering any collaboration, communicate what matters to you. Clear communication is important to me. Those few sentences prevent countless misunderstandings later. Many people believe resentment comes from difficult people. More often, resentment comes from delayed communication. It grows every time you tolerate behavior that quietly violates your own values. Eventually, the pressure becomes too great. You explode, and then people remember the explosion, not the months of silence that created it. Calm consistency builds credibility. Emotional outbursts usually weaken it. If you've already allowed unhealthy patterns to develop, don't assume it's too late. It isn't. But understand something. Whenever you change your standards, the people around you will need time to adjust. Some will adapt quickly. Some will resist. Neither reaction changes the fact that your boundaries remain valid. Their adjustment belongs to them. Your clarity belongs to you. There is tremendous strength in calmly saying, this works for me. This doesn't, without apology, without guilt, without anger. Remember, boundaries are not walls. Walls keep everyone out. Boundaries simply show people where healthy connection begins. They don't destroy relationships. They protect them. You can still smile. You can still be generous. You can still care deeply, while also making it unmistakably clear how you expect to be treated. Because kindness without structure creates confusion. Structure combined with kindness creates trust. And trust over time becomes respect. The earlier you define your limits, the less often you'll need to defend them, and the less energy you spend defending yourself. The stronger, calmer, and more unshakable your presence naturally becomes. Chapter 6. Detach from approval. Imagine you're sitting in a meeting. An idea comes into your mind. You know it's valuable. You know it could solve the problem everyone has been discussing. For a brief moment, you almost speak. Then your eyes scan the room. Someone looks serious. Someone else seems distracted. A voice inside your head whispers, "What if they think it's a bad idea? What if they disagree? What if I sound foolish?" So you stay quiet. A few minutes later, someone else shares almost the exact same idea. The room nods. People compliment them. And you sit there wondering, why didn't I just say it? The answer usually has nothing to do with confidence. It has everything to do with approval. The desire to be liked is one of the strongest psychological forces shaping human behavior. Most people don't realize how often it controls their decisions. It determines when they speak, when they stay silent, when they help, when they refuse, even how they walk into a room, because approval feels safe. When people smile, agree, compliment you, or tell you you're kind, your nervous system relaxes. You feel accepted, included, protected. But there is a hidden danger. The more your emotional stability depends on other people's approval, the less stable you become. Because approval is never permanent. It changes with people's moods, their expectations, their insecurities, their circumstances. If your identity depends on something that constantly changes, your confidence will constantly change with it. That is why approval-driven people often appear uncertain. Before speaking, they check everyone's expressions. Before making a decision, they wonder how everyone else will react. Before setting a boundary, they imagine every possible disappointment. Without realizing it, they've handed control of their emotional state to everyone around them. This isn't kindness, it's hypervigilance. You're no longer listening to your own values. You're constantly monitoring other people's emotional temperature. And that's exhausting. Let me tell you about Olivia. Olivia had always been known as the easy person. She rarely argued, rarely disagreed. If friends wanted one restaurant, she agreed. If coworkers preferred another approach, she adapted. If her family expected something from her, she adjusted her schedule. People described her as incredibly pleasant, and she believed that was something to be proud of. Then one evening, a close friend asked her a simple question. "What do you actually want?" Olivia opened her mouth, and nothing came out. Not because she didn't have an opinion, because she had spent so many years prioritizing everyone else's preferences. She had stopped listening to her own. That moment frightened her. She realized she had become excellent at reading everyone else's expectations, but almost incapable of hearing herself. That is what approval addiction quietly does. It disconnects you from your own internal compass. You stop asking, "What feels right?" and begin asking, "What will make everyone happy?" Unfortunately, those two questions rarely produce the same answer. There is something important to understand. Wanting approval is completely human. Every person wants acceptance. Every person wants connection. The goal isn't to eliminate that desire. The goal is to stop allowing it to control your behavior. There is a profound difference between enjoying approval and depending on it. When approval becomes a requirement, your personality begins changing to fit every environment. With one group, you become quieter. With another, you become more agreeable. With another, you laugh at jokes you don't even find funny. Eventually, you become so adaptable that you no longer know which version is actually you. People often mistake this flexibility for emotional intelligence. It isn't. Real emotional intelligence allows you to understand others without abandoning yourself. Approval addiction asks you to sacrifice yourself in exchange for temporary comfort. Think about how much energy this requires. Every conversation becomes a performance. Every disagreement feels dangerous. Every criticism feels personal. One raised eyebrow, one delayed reply, one disappointed expression can ruin your entire day. Not because those things are actually catastrophic, but because your brain has learned to interpret disapproval as emotional danger. That pattern often begins much earlier in life. Many people grew up believing love had to be earned. Good grades earned praise. Good behavior earned affection. Being helpful earned attention. Making mistakes created distance, so the mind learned something powerful. If I keep everyone happy, I'll stay safe. That strategy may have protected you once, but eventually it becomes a prison because adulthood demands something different. It asks you to remain authentic, even when not everyone agrees. One of the clearest signs that approval is controlling your life is how you react to disagreement. Someone questions your opinion. Immediately, you begin explaining, defending, softening your position, or changing it entirely. Not because you discovered you were wrong, but because disagreement itself feels unbearable. Strong people don't enjoy conflict, but neither do they fear it. They understand something important. Disagreement is not rejection. Someone can disagree with your opinion without rejecting your worth. Someone can decline your request without disrespecting you. Someone can feel disappointed without making you responsible for fixing their emotions. This distinction changes everything. The moment you stop interpreting every uncomfortable reaction as personal rejection, your freedom begins. Here's a simple practice. The next time you express an opinion, resist the urge to immediately explain it. State it clearly, then pause. Allow people to respond however they choose. Notice what happens inside your body. You may feel the urge to rescue the conversation, to soften your words, to reassure everyone. Stay with that feeling. Don't immediately act on it. That discomfort is simply your nervous system learning that approval is optional, not essential. There is another powerful shift. Stop measuring your day by how many people were pleased with you. Instead, ask yourself different questions. Was I honest? Did I respect my own values? Did I communicate clearly? Did I keep my word? Those questions build internal confidence. Approval builds emotional dependence. Internal alignment builds emotional freedom. Something remarkable happens when you stop chasing approval. You become calmer. You speak more slowly. You stop rushing to convince everyone. You stop over-explaining every decision. Ironically, people often begin respecting you more, not because you've become harsher, but because you've become more consistent. Consistency creates trust, and trust creates respect. Remember this. Not everyone will like you. They never could. Even the kindest people in history were criticized. Trying to avoid disapproval completely means giving strangers the authority to design your personality. That is far too expensive a price to pay. You were never meant to live as a reflection of everyone else's expectations. You were meant to become someone whose actions are guided by values, not by applause. Approval comes, approval goes, but character remains. The moment you stop chasing acceptance from every person you meet, you begin earning something far more valuable: self-respect. And once self-respect becomes stronger than the need to be liked, the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you make decisions quietly begins to change. Because true confidence is never built on hearing everyone say yes. It is built on remaining steady, even when someone says no. Chapter 7. Build an identity that doesn't depend on other people's opinions. Imagine walking into a room where no one knows your name, no one knows your job, no one knows your achievements, no one knows whether you're successful or struggling. Would you still feel comfortable being yourself? Or would you immediately begin searching for ways to make everyone like you? For many people, that question is deeply uncomfortable because they have spent years building an identity based not on who they are, but on how other people react to them. A compliment lifts them, a criticism crushes them, approval gives them confidence, disapproval steals it away. That is one of the most exhausting ways to live, because the moment your identity belongs to other people's opinions, you no longer belong to yourself. There's a silent addiction that keeps many kind people trapped. It isn't money. It isn't status. It isn't comfort. It's approval. The desire to be liked, to be seen as kind, easygoing, helpful, agreeable. Approval feels good because the human brain is wired for connection. When someone smiles at you, agrees with you, or praises you, your nervous system relaxes. You feel accepted, included, safe. There is nothing wrong with enjoying that feeling. The problem begins when you depend on it, because approval is unstable. It changes with people's moods, their expectations, their personal struggles. Someone may appreciate you today and misunderstand you tomorrow. If your emotional stability rises and falls with those changes, you will never experience lasting confidence. Instead, you become a constant observer. Before speaking, you study everyone's face. Before making a decision, you wonder who might disagree. Before expressing a preference, you calculate how it might affect everyone's opinion of you. Eventually, you stop asking, "What do I believe?" and begin asking, "What will they think?" That shift quietly changes your entire identity. You begin editing yourself before anyone else has the chance to. Not because someone demanded it, but because you've learned to anticipate rejection. Many people mistake this behavior for kindness. It isn't. It's hypervigilance. You're no longer responding to reality. You're responding to imagined disapproval, and living that way is exhausting. Let me tell you about Ethan. Ethan was the kind of person everyone described as pleasant. He rarely disagreed, rarely challenged anyone. If a group wanted one thing, he went along with it. If someone criticized his ideas, he immediately softened his position. His greatest goal wasn't being right. It was making sure no one left the conversation upset with him. For years, he believed this made him emotionally mature. Then something happened. A coworker asked him a simple question. "What do you actually think?" Ethan laughed nervously. Then he realized he didn't know how to answer. Not because he lacked opinions, because he'd spent so many years adjusting those opinions to fit everyone else. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped hearing his own voice. That realization changed everything. He discovered that approval had quietly replaced authenticity. And without authenticity, confidence can never fully develop. Because confidence isn't pretending everyone agrees with you. Confidence is remaining connected to yourself, even when they don't. Many people learned approval seeking long before adulthood. As children, love sometimes felt conditional. Good grades earned praise. Good behavior earned affection. Being quiet earned approval. Being helpful earned attention. Making mistakes, expressing anger, or disappointing someone sometimes created distance. The child's mind reaches a simple conclusion. If I keep everyone happy, I'll be safe. That strategy may have helped you once, but carrying it into adulthood creates a different problem. You become responsible for emotions that were never yours to control. Someone looks disappointed. You immediately assume you've done something wrong. Someone disagrees with your opinion. You begin questioning yourself. Someone seems upset. You rush to fix the situation. Not because you're responsible, but because your nervous system has learned to associate disapproval with danger. Here's the truth. Disagreement is not rejection. Someone can disagree with your opinion and still respect you. Someone can decline your request and still value you. Someone can feel disappointed without making you responsible for repairing their emotions. That distinction changes everything. When you stop confusing disagreement with rejection, you become emotionally freer. One of the clearest signs that approval controls your life is what happens after you express an opinion. Do you immediately explain yourself? Do you soften your words? Do you apologize for what you believe? Do you begin searching everyone's face for reassurance? If so, you're not communicating, you're negotiating for acceptance. Strong individuals don't expect universal agreement. They understand something most people eventually forget. Not everyone has to approve of you. For you to approve of yourself, that doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you emotionally independent. Try something simple. The next time you share an opinion, resist the urge to defend it immediately. Say what you mean. Then allow silence. Notice how quickly your mind wants to fill the space. It wants to explain, clarify, convince, earn agreement. Stay still. Let the silence exist. That silence isn't threatening. It's simply unfamiliar. And unfamiliar doesn't mean unsafe. Every time you resist chasing reassurance, your nervous system becomes a little stronger. Gradually, you begin measuring yourself differently. Instead of asking, "Did everyone like me today?" Ask, "Was I honest? Did I act according to my values? Did I communicate clearly? Did I respect my own boundaries? Those questions build something far more stable than approval ever could. They build self-respect. Interestingly, the less desperately you seek approval, the more natural respect often appears. People trust consistency. They trust individuals who don't constantly reshape themselves to match every audience. Consistency communicates stability. Stability creates credibility, and credibility earns respect. Remember, even the wisest leaders, the greatest thinkers, and the kindest people in history were criticized. If they couldn't avoid disapproval, neither can you. Trying to please everyone isn't kindness. It's an impossible assignment, one that guarantees you'll eventually disappoint yourself. You were never meant to become a reflection of every opinion surrounding you. You were meant to become someone guided by principles, not applause. Approval will come. Approval will disappear. People will misunderstand you. People will admire you. Both experiences are temporary. Character is not. The moment your identity stops depending on other people's reactions, something remarkable happens. Your posture becomes calmer. Your decisions become clearer. Your voice becomes steadier. Not because everyone suddenly agrees with you, but because you no longer require them to. That is the quiet freedom emotionally strong people carry into every room. They appreciate approval, but they never depend on it. And once you stop depending on it, you discover a form of confidence that no compliment can create and no criticism can take away. Chapter 8. Respect begins with self-respect. Imagine standing in front of a mirror early in the morning. No one else is awake. No one is watching. No one is judging you. For a few quiet seconds, it's just you. And then a simple question appears. Do I actually trust myself? Not your abilities, not your intelligence, not your experience. Do you trust yourself to protect your own peace? Do you trust yourself to speak when something feels wrong? Do you trust yourself to walk away from situations that no longer honor you? For many people, the answer is far more uncertain than they expected, because respect from others always begins in a place no one else can see. It begins with the relationship you have with yourself. Many people spend years searching for confidence. They read books, watch motivational videos, practice speaking more clearly, try to appear more assertive, yet something still feels missing. The reason is simple. Confidence cannot grow where self-trust is constantly being broken. Every time you ignore your instincts, you weaken that trust. Every time your body tells you this doesn't feel right and you silence it, you teach yourself that your own voice cannot be relied upon. Every time you promise yourself, next time I'll say no, but immediately say yes again, you send another message. My own promises don't matter. Imagine having a friend who constantly made promises, then broke every single one. Eventually, you would stop believing them. The same thing happens inside your own mind. When you repeatedly betray yourself, your subconscious slowly stops believing your words. That's why so many people struggle with confidence. It's not because they're weak. It's because they've unintentionally trained themselves not to trust their own decisions. Let me tell you about Rebecca. Rebecca spent years trying to become more confident. She attended workshops, read books about communication, practiced speaking with more authority. People often complimented her knowledge, but privately, she still felt uncertain. One evening, while reflecting on her day, she noticed something. She had agreed to 3 different requests she didn't actually want to accept. None of them were major. One was covering another coworker's shift. One was attending an event she wasn't interested in. One was spending hours solving someone else's problem. Individually, they seemed insignificant. Together, they revealed a pattern. She wasn't lacking confidence. She was constantly abandoning herself. The next morning, she made one small promise. Today, if something doesn't feel right, I'll listen. That day, she declined one unnecessary commitment. Nothing dramatic happened. No one became angry. No relationships ended. But something changed inside her. For the first time in a long time, she kept a promise to herself. That evening, she felt lighter. not because she had done less, because she had finally acted in alignment with her own values. Confidence isn't created by one courageous moment. It's built through hundreds of small moments where your actions match your inner truth. Self-respect works the same way. It isn't a feeling, it's a pattern. It's created every time you honor your own limits, every time you protect your time, every time you tell the truth instead of saying what feels safest. People often believe self-respect begins after others start treating them better. In reality, the opposite is true. Others usually begin adjusting, only after you adjust yourself. Think about the message your behavior sends. If you constantly interrupt your own plans, others assume your plans aren't important. If you regularly sacrifice your own well-being, others assume you'll continue doing it. If you repeatedly tolerate disrespect, others eventually believe you've accepted it. Without saying a single word, you're teaching people what your standards are. That's why self-respect is never only personal. It becomes visible. It shapes the way people experience you. One of the clearest signs of self-respect is consistency. You don't have different boundaries for different people just because you're afraid of losing them. You don't abandon your values because someone important disagrees. You don't become someone else simply to receive approval. Consistency creates trust, not only in the minds of others, but inside yourself. Your nervous system begins learning something powerful. I can rely on myself. Those 5 words quietly transform everything, because once you trust yourself, external approval becomes less necessary. Criticism becomes less frightening. Disagreement becomes easier to tolerate. You stop reacting emotionally to every opinion because your identity is no longer built on someone else's judgment. There is another important truth. Self-respect doesn't require perfection. You will still make mistakes. You will still say yes when you meant no. You will still occasionally stay silent when you wish you had spoken. That doesn't erase your progress. What matters is what happens next. Do you notice the pattern? Do you learn from it? Do you return to your values? Growth isn't measured by never falling back into old habits. It's measured by how quickly you return to yourself. Here's a practice you can begin today. At the end of every evening, ask yourself 3 simple questions. Where did I honor myself today? Where did I ignore my own needs? What can I do differently tomorrow? Notice something. These questions don't ask whether everyone liked you. They don't ask whether anyone praised you. They ask whether you remained loyal to yourself. Because that's where genuine confidence is born. Every honest answer strengthens your awareness. Every small correction strengthens your character. Every promise you keep strengthens your identity. Over time, those small moments accumulate. You begin walking differently, speaking differently, making decisions differently. Not because you're trying to appear confident, but because confidence has become the natural result of trusting yourself. People notice that kind of presence. They may not be able to explain it, but they feel it. There is a calmness that belongs to people who no longer negotiate with their own values. A steadiness that comes from knowing, even if this conversation becomes uncomfortable, I won't abandon myself. That is real strength, not dominance, not control, not intimidation, just quiet integrity. Remember, the world usually follows the example you set. If you treat your own time as valuable, others are more likely to value it. If you protect your own peace, others become more careful with it. If you respect yourself consistently, you make it much easier for others to do the same. Everything we've explored in this journey comes back to one simple truth. Respect is never something you chase. It is something you quietly cultivate every time you choose not to walk away from yourself. And once that foundation is strong, the respect you once begged the world to give you often arrives naturally. Chapter 9. Live with quiet strength. Imagine that 6 months have passed. You still smile. You still help people. You still care deeply about the people in your life. But something feels different. A coworker asks you to take on another assignment. Instead of answering immediately, you pause. You think. Then you calmly say, I won't be able to do that today. No apology, no guilt, no racing heartbeat, just clarity. The conversation moves on. No argument, no disaster. You walk away feeling lighter than you ever expected. Not because you refused someone, but because for the first time, you didn't refuse yourself. That is what quiet strength feels like. It isn't loud, it isn't dramatic. Most people believe confidence arrives all at once. They imagine waking up one morning fearless, never doubting themselves again. But that's not how real confidence is built. Each decision at a time, one honest conversation at a time, one protected boundary at a time. By now, you've probably noticed a pattern running through everything we've discussed. Respect has very little to do with becoming more intimidating. It has almost everything to do with becoming more aligned. Alignment between your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Because every time those three things move together, your presence becomes steadier. People feel that steadiness before they understand it. You don't have to announce your confidence. They notice it naturally. Think back to where this journey began. You believed kindness alone would earn respect, so you became the dependable one, the understanding one, the person who adjusted, the person who carried more than anyone else, the person who kept saying yes. You weren't trying to manipulate anyone. You simply believed that sacrificing yourself was the price of being loved. But now you understand something different. Kindness without boundaries becomes convenience. Generosity without choice becomes obligation. Availability without limits becomes expectation. And eventually, expectation replaces appreciation. That realization is not meant to make you cynical. It's meant to make you intentional. There is a profound difference between helping because you choose to and helping because you fear what will happen if you don't. The action may look identical. The psychology is completely different. Choice creates peace. Fear creates exhaustion. This is why emotionally strong people don't constantly ask themselves, will everyone approve? Instead, they ask, does this align with my values? That single shift changes everything because values remain stable. Approval never does. Some days people will praise you. Other days, the same people may criticize you. If your identity depends on those reactions, you'll spend your life changing shape to match someone else's expectations. But if your identity is rooted in your principles, you remain steady, whether people agree with you or not. Remember Daniel. He believed working harder would eventually earn recognition. Instead, he discovered that reliability without boundaries often creates dependence rather than respect. Remember Maya. She confused endless availability with loyalty until she realized people had stopped seeing her as a person and had started seeing her as a role. Remember Aaron, the man who believed saying no would create conflict, only to discover that most of the conflict had existed inside his own imagination. And remember Rebecca, who spent years searching for confidence, only to realize she wasn't lacking confidence at all. She had simply stopped trusting herself. Every one of those stories points toward the same lesson. The relationship you have with yourself becomes the model everyone else follows. If you consistently abandon yourself, others often learn to do the same. If you consistently honor yourself, others begin adjusting to that standard. Not because you demand respect, because you demonstrate it. There will still be moments when old habits return. Someone will ask for one more favor. Someone will question your decision. Someone will become disappointed. In those moments, don't ask, how do I keep everyone comfortable? Ask, what response allows me to remain honest with myself? That question will guide you far more reliably than fear ever could. Understand something important. Setting boundaries doesn't guarantee everyone will stay. Some people only enjoyed the version of you that never said no. When you change, they may become uncomfortable. Let them. Not every relationship is meant to survive your growth. The people who truly value you will eventually learn your new standards. And those standards won't push healthy people away. They'll create healthier relationships. Because emotionally mature people don't need unlimited access to feel connected. They need honesty. They need clarity. They need consistency. That's what trust is built upon. As you continue practicing these ideas, you'll notice subtle changes. You'll stop rushing to answer every request. You'll stop apologizing before speaking. You'll stop explaining every decision. You'll become more comfortable with silence, more comfortable with disagreement, more comfortable allowing people to experience emotions that don't belong to you. And strangely, life becomes quieter. Not because fewer problems appear, because fewer unnecessary battles exist inside your own mind. You no longer spend hours replaying conversations. You stop wondering whether everyone still likes you. You stop measuring your worth by how useful you've been today. Instead, you begin measuring something else. Did I act with integrity? Did I respect my own limits? Did I tell the truth? Did I remain aligned with my values? Those questions create a confidence that external validation never can, because self-respect is renewable. Every day gives you another opportunity to strengthen it. Never forget this. People don't remember every favor you did. They don't remember every extra hour you sacrificed. But they always remember how you made them experience your presence. Was it calm? Was it steady? Was it clear? That is what leaves a lasting impression. The strongest people rarely need to prove their strength. They don't dominate conversations. They don't demand attention. They don't seek control. Their confidence comes from something much quieter. They know who they are. They know what they value. And they no longer abandon those values simply to avoid temporary discomfort. That is the kind of strength no one can give you, and no one can take away. So from this moment forward, when you feel the familiar urge to apologize, pause. When you feel pressure to explain yourself, pause. When you feel the automatic impulse to say yes, pause. Inside that brief moment lives a choice. The same choice you've had all along, to continue living according to old conditioning, or to begin responding from quiet certainty. Because respect has never started with other people. It has always started with the way you treat yourself when no one else is watching. Be kind, be generous, be compassionate. But never confuse kindness with self-abandonment. Never mistake endless availability for love. And never believe that becoming smaller is the price of belonging. The world doesn't need a version of you that disappears to keep everyone else comfortable. It needs someone who can remain warm while standing firmly on their own ground. That is quiet strength. That is lasting confidence. And that is where real respect begins. Closing. Take a moment and think back to the person you were at the beginning of this journey. Maybe someone who believed that being endlessly available was the same as being kind. Someone who thought saying yes would earn appreciation. Someone who quietly carried other people's expectations while setting aside their own. Now ask yourself, what has really changed? Perhaps the world hasn't changed at all. The people around you may still ask for your time. They may still expect your attention. They may still hope you'll solve their problems, but something inside you is different. You now understand that respect is never something another person decides to give you. It begins with the decisions you make every single day. The decision to speak honestly, the decision to protect your peace, the decision to stop apologizing simply for existing, the decision to say no when no is the truthful answer, the decision to value your own time as much as you value everyone else's. These decisions may seem small, almost invisible, but over weeks, months, and years, they reshape your entire life. Because every healthy boundary sends the same quiet message to your mind. I matter too. Every promise you keep to yourself strengthens trust. Every honest conversation strengthens your character. Every moment you choose authenticity over approval makes your confidence a little more real. You don't have to become colder. You don't have to become harder. You don't have to stop caring. In fact, the strongest people often remain the kindest. The difference is, their kindness is no longer driven by fear. It is guided by choice. They help because they want to, not because they are afraid of disappointing someone. They give generously, but they don't give away themselves. and that is the balance worth protecting. As you move forward, there will still be moments when old habits return. You'll feel the urge to explain yourself, to apologize unnecessarily, to say yes before you've even thought about it. When those moments come, don't judge yourself. Simply pause, take one slow breath, and remember everything you've learned here. Respect begins long before anyone else notices it. It begins in the quiet moments, when you choose not to abandon yourself, because the life you're trying to build, the confidence you're trying to feel, and the respect you're hoping to receive have never been waiting somewhere outside of you. They have been growing. Every time you choose honesty over fear, every time you honor your own boundaries, every time you remember that your worth has never depended on how useful you are to everyone else. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this audiobook helped you see yourself a little more clearly, carry these lessons into your everyday life. Not all at once, just one decision at a time, because lasting change is never created through one extraordinary moment. It is created through hundreds of ordinary moments. When you quietly choose to respect yourself, and from that foundation, everything else begins to change.